Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of this newsletter is going to be, why do I feel so lousy? Well, I've got an email here from a viewer who I used to do a bunch of coaching sessions, I guess about a year and a half ago over the course of a summer. When he first came to me, he was having a hard time meeting women and keeping them in his life. And he was also struggling to communicate with women, especially the women that he worked with and the ones that worked for him. And because he was just a little abrasive and he didn't really understand how to communicate and be thoughtful and appreciative and get women to actually want to go out of their way to do things for him. So after I worked with him for a few months, he was able to get the women in his office to be advocates for him. So when he wasn't there, instead of throwing them under the bus like they were doing, they were building them up and they were talking good about them. And one of them was actually the wife of his actual boss. And so that can come in very handy if you get the boss's wife on your side and she becomes an advocate for you. Even when you screw up, she's going to be saying good things about you. And so he got himself into a situation here, and you're going to see, it's like when you apply the things that I teach, you're going to cause women to really, at least women that have a high level of attraction for you to start with, you're going to cause them to fall for you in a very short period of time, start chasing you and pursuing you. And the key about that is not to take the things that I teach you and use it to manipulate women, but instead to get yourself involved in relationships with the kind of women you really want, because you can really hurt a woman emotionally and break a lot of hearts with this stuff here, especially if you kind of get to a place where you just kind of go along with things. And that's kind of what he did here. So before we get into his email, I got a quote that I'd like to share with you about this topic. It says, when we give our power away to another person in order to maintain a relationship built upon deception and or compromising our values, it will most often lead to our feeling sad, angry, empty, and ashamed of ourselves. Many times people are not honest with themselves and their lovers because the fear of being alone or telling the truth seems more real, risky, and painful than risking losing everything in order to create the life we want or to attract the kind of person we know we really deserve. You should never bullshit yourself or another in order to maintain a mediocre or unfulfilling relationship. In the end, you will only make yourself miserable and delay or prevent the arrival of what you really want and deserve. So let's go ahead and get into his email. He says, "Hi, Coach. My question is, why do I feel so lousy when I feel like I should be happy?" Well, you've probably heard me say before, life is not all sunshine and roses. And when we start to feel icky feelings or bad feelings or feelings that just don't feel good, whether it's a feeling of depression or sadness or loneliness or unhappiness or frustration, whatever the negative emotion tends to be, more often than not, what the average person tends to do is try to drink that bad feeling away. They try to smoke that bad feeling away. They try to eat that bad feeling away. They try to bury themselves in exercise or their work, in essence, in order and just ignore the elephant in the room, so to speak, or that giant lump under the carpet that stinks. And we just want to avoid it. But what you resist in life persists. And when you're not feeling good, the quickest way to move through that is to acknowledge what you feel, is to acknowledge the lousy, crummy feelings that you're feeling, and just be totally 100% present with it. And just say what you feel. I feel like shit right now. I feel depressed right now. Sometimes life feels hopeless. Sometimes it feels like things are never going to work out for me. Sometimes it feels like I'm just never going to get there. Those are real, true feelings that are yours. And if you can internalize those and be present with them, much like a mother is present when her child, if you've ever watched this, when a mother sees that her child, her son or her daughter is upset and crying, is really emotional, she usually gets down on one knee and looks him or her right in the eye and says, "Honey, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong." And then the child starts expressing what's wrong, and she talks to him for a few minutes, and after the kid has expressed his emotions and expressed the pain or the fear or whatever, or the hurt if he fell down and stubbed his knee, what happens is it's like 2 or 3 minutes later, that same kid was like crying like somebody cut his arms and his legs off, is running around like nothing ever happened. Well, why is that? It's because they were completely present with the negative emotions, and they felt it, they honored it, and they moved right through it, and they got right back into feeling happy. But we as adults, especially as men, were taught that you're not supposed to feel that way. You're not supposed to feel sad. Well, I'm not telling you to go out and start crying the blues to the women that you meet or your friends. The key is just to understand when you don't feel good. I mean, sometimes you just have to be present with that. It may last for 5 minutes. Sometimes it may last for an hour or two. But the more you can be present and honor those feelings, what you're actually doing is you're honoring a part of yourself. You're honoring a part of your personality. But when you ignore it and you use substances or food or exercise or excessive working to just trying to run from those things, what ends up happening is you end up making yourself miserable, because in essence what's going on is you're denying a part of yourself. And part of the human condition is we experience all kinds of range of emotions. Like I said earlier, everything's not all sunshine and roses in life, and sometimes life just sucks, and sometimes you just have to feel like shit. But the sooner you can acknowledge that feeling and that emotion, the more you can be present with it, the quicker it will dissolve and you're able to move through that. It's more of an art than really so much a skill. And so the more you do it, the more comfortable you do it. Sometimes you may have to just sit in your room and cry for a little while and put your pillow over your face and scream whatever you're feeling into it. But it's like as soon as you can acknowledge that crummy feeling, because sometimes it's like life, you have every reason to be happy, but yet you still feel like shit. And so sometimes you just have to acknowledge it. But the more you try to run from that, the worse you're going to make in the long run. The more miserable you're going to make yourself in the long run. And so he says, I dated a girl for 6 months, but she still stuck around for an entire 6 months after she knew it was clear I was looking for the exit signs. Well, obviously she was definitely projecting her attraction level onto you and not really paying attention to what you were feeling for her, because obviously she probably didn't want to admit that it really wasn't going to go anywhere. And in this I've talked to this particular client about this girl before, and he got to a point, it was like things were good and they were easy. It wasn't what he really wanted, but he just kind of went along with it. That's exactly what I did, and caused me to get into my first marriage when I was in my mid-20s. I really cared about my ex-wife. I loved her, but I was never in love with her, and it was never going to happen. But I was bullshitting myself, and I was lying to myself, trying to make myself feel something that just my heart was naturally not going to feel. You can't force yourself to love somebody when it just doesn't come internally. And when you know something's not right, it's really tough, especially in my case, because I'd never really had anybody love me like that because of the environment that I grew up in. I never got hugged. I never got I love yous. I never got I'm proud of you. It's like across the whole range. Everybody in my family was like that. So like for the first time in my life, I had a girl. It's like it seemed like no matter what I did, she loved me no matter what. She loved me unconditionally. And like when you never experienced that, I was 24, 25. That was the first time in my life I ever felt truly loved unconditionally by somebody. It's not easy just to walk away from that and toss that person aside, because you think, God, I'm just 25 years of my life it took to get to this point where I actually have somebody that feels that way about me. And so it's not so easy to let go of, and especially when you got other people, especially a lot, because I had a lot of women that I worked with. Oh, don't let her go, don't be a fool, she's a great girl, don't let her get away, and that kind of nonsense. And I literally talked myself into marrying her when what I should have done was to end the relationship. And all I did in the long run was hurt myself and hurt her emotionally. And it was a learning situation. And that taught me a lesson. I swore that I would never get married again unless I was 100% sure that I was with the right person, when it felt right, because it never felt right with her, but I talked myself into it. And I see a lot of people doing that. It's like I talk to people all over the world and they do the same kinds of things. And that's why I love sharing this stuff, So somebody that's watching this, it's in that same kind of situation, can say, you know what, that's exactly what I'm feeling, and I don't want to go down that road. I don't want to go through a divorce and spend all that money and go through all that, when it's better off just to move on until you get to the place where it feels right with somebody. So he says, I tried many ways to end the relationship, from face-to-face breakups to ignoring her, to staying at my parents', to verbally putting her down, you name it. I booked a phone session with you, and your advice was to turn her off completely and get her to break up with me. Yeah, basically what I taught him to do is some NLP techniques and get her to associate basically to turn into like a needy, insecure jackass and do all the kinds of things that he used to do that always turned off the women that he really wanted. And so he says, I took your advice and it worked great. Isn't it amazing? Sometimes you have to do that when a woman's kind of acting stalkerish, because it basically causes her to get totally turned off and lose attraction for you. Because sometimes acting indifferent with these kind of women, all it's going to do is make them want you even more. And plus, because he stayed with this girl for 6 months, instead of just kind of having a casual hookup that maybe would have lasted a few weeks, he stuck with her because it was so easy. Because he didn't really have to work too hard for it, and it seemed like no matter what he did, she loved him anyways. And so it's like that's the first experience that you get to experience that with a woman. It's really tough to let something like that go, even though deep down you know it's not right. He says, but 2 weeks later, she's crying about how I was trying to get her to dump me on purpose, and that way I didn't have to deal with her chasing after me. I admitted it was true, and I took it a step further to say I was not in love with her, and I never loved her. Well, at least you were honest with her. It took a whole year for you to be completely brutally honest, but at least you did it. He said also, I had to change my phone number, and periodically she may show up or leave a message on my Facebook or work phone. I've never been so stressed out in getting rid of someone. He says, now that it's over, I feel sad, like a loser and a failure. Why is that? Because you violated your dignity. It's like deep down you knew what you were doing was not the right thing to do. It was like it's kind of like the pendulum swung completely opposite of what you'd always done in the past, which always drove women away. And now you're really not doing anything. The woman's all over you. And on top of that, you're with a needy, insecure woman, which just makes matters even worse. And so what I would do, it's like, because you can't always change your circumstances. I mean, at the end of the day, what's happened has happened. The way you behaved is the way you behaved. And the way you look at these things is the same way I looked at my divorce and all the women that I screwed up with, is you got to look at it as a gift. One of my spiritual teachers, he said, there is no imperfection. You've only ever done what you were meant to do. And now you got to see firsthand the exact opposite of how a woman turned you off when she exhibited the same kind of behaviors that you used to exhibit. And you can look at it, because you can't change what's happened. I mean, you can't go back in time and undo all of those things. The only choice you have at this point is what it means to you. And so you should look at it as a gift. And you just say to yourself, kind of the same way I did with my ex-wife, is that there is absolutely no way in hell I will ever do that to myself again, and I certainly will never do that to a woman when I know it's not right. You got to have the balls to walk away from a situation like this when you know deep down it's not what you really want. You maybe heard talk. I've got a guy that used to work for me. He had a child with this woman that he's broken up with her 4 or 5 times over the past 5 or 6 years. Then he's screwing around on her. He's got 4 or 5 women, usually at a time, that he's banging and cheating on her, and she has no idea, because he's too fucking weak to be single and to go it alone. And all he's doing is hurting himself. He's hurting this girl that thinks that he's totally committed to her, and that's going to damage his daughter as well once she grows up, unless he finally grows a set of balls and is able to walk away from that situation and finally get the kind of woman that he really wants instead of settling, because you will never be happy when you settle in life, whether it's with a lover or friendships or business partnerships or your career. It's something to think about. So if you'd like to get my help personally with any kind of a challenge that you're having, go to my website, click the products tab at the top of your screen, and book a paid phone coaching session with yours truly. And I will talk to you soon.